That's Hunter.
What's truly good with you guys? Today we're going to cook up on the all new motion controllers featuring the Motion 32 and the 16. Now I've done a full deep dive on the Fender Studio Pro channel. If you want to learn how to use these and get started right away, make sure you head over there to their channel for that. I'm honored to be featuring these two joints. So let's have some fun and let's cook up a beat today. Let's get right into it. All right, so I'm going to start on the Motion 16 here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start our loop points. So we'll come over here to the loop start, which is this knob right here. Okay, and then we can choose our end point here, which is this one, number 4. Cool, so I'm gonna set that to end at bar 5 there. Then we're gonna turn on our loop and we have that engaged. And so what I wanna do is start with some drums here. So I'm gonna go to add, and then we're going to go to an instrument here. And then I'm going to go to electronic drums. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit load. So now this loads up our impact, which is really nice. So what I'm going to do here is go to one of my kits here. Cool. So we have our drums loaded. Perfect. Now let's start out by laying down some drums. So what I'm going to do in Studio Pro here is kind of just tighten them up. So I'm gonna go into our piano roll here, and then I'm gonna go to the note mode instead of the flags there. And so I'm gonna do Command A in the piano roll here, and then we'll quantize those drums. And then for the hi-hats here, I'm gonna go ahead and nudge these behind the beat. Perfect. So now I'm going to go into Splice and grab some percussions here. Perfect. So we'll add this percussion right over here and layer this with our drums. All right, so let's move on to Motion 32, and we're going to add a Rhodes here. So we'll go to add, and then I want to add an instrument here. And then we'll go to electric piano. We'll hit load. And then that loads up our presence here. Now I can physically play the chords myself, but what we can do is go to chord mode here and go through the different progressions that they have. So I like that a whole lot, and we can actually play this as a sample chop. Check it out. All right, that's crazy. Let's lay down this progression over our beat. Now, using chord mode here, we're not limited to just using stock plugins. We can also use third-party plugins. So now we can play this chord progression using Omnisphere. Crazy work. So let's lay down this chord progression over our beat. So what I'm going to do is create some space for the low end. This way we can add some bass. So what we'll do is go to add, and then I'm going to go to effect. We'll go to Pro EQ, and then we'll hit load. And so now we have our EQ here. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the low cut frequency. And so we can actually use our motion controller to adjust this parameter. And we can also do the same thing to the Rhodes. We can add that same EQ. So now that we have some space here, we can add some bass. So I'm going to go to add here. We'll go to make sure we're on instrument. And then I'm going to come over here to the synth bass here. So we'll go over to synth bass and hit load. So now we're in my tie. All right, I like this bass here. This is called the bass 17. So what I'm going to do is change the octave by hitting our octave button. And we can actually make our adjustments to the instrument right here on the motion controller here. So we have our cutoff. Add some resonance. And so now let's play some bass over our groove here. All right, crazy. Now let's add some bass over our beat. Sheesh. All right, next I want to add a synth lead on top of this. So we'll go to add another plugin. Then we'll go to synth lead here. We'll go to load. Let's come out of the add screen. I like this one. Now what's dope about this is I can add an effect on top of this. So I can go to add and then go to effect. And then I want to add an analog delay. So we'll hit load. Then we'll come out of the add screen. And so now we're in the analog delay, which is crazy. So now I can adjust all of the parameters here. So I'm going to change this to a quarter note delay. Very nice. And then I can adjust the stereo field here. So the width. We have access to everything, which is really dope. So now let's add the synth lead over our beat. Turn up some of that delay. So now I want to add some strings on top of this. So let's go to add. We'll go to a new instrument and then let's go to the synth strings. Let's go to load. So now it pulls up my tie for us. Nice. All right, let's lay these strings over our beat now. Nice. All right, the next thing I want to show you guys is introducing the mixer and third-party plugins into the mix. So what we'll do is go to our mixer here and we can kind of level out everything once again. Now that we have good levels here, I'm going to go to the master fader and I'm going to add the God particle. And so now I'm going to show you how to see these parameters on the motion controller here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come over here to plugin And then I'm going to go on the mixer here and go to the God particle and click that. And so now we can see that we have this on our motion here. Now we can assign. I'm going to go ahead and click this down arrow here. We'll go to the settings knob. And so I'm going to double click on where it says motion 32. All right, so now I can click a parameter that I would like. So let's say the input here. I'm gonna click this, and then we can go ahead and grab this hand and drag it to the knob that we would like. So I'm gonna drag that over here. So this is the input gain. Okay, so next I want to grab this high end here. So the high end EQ. So we want to click and kind of just move it a little bit, and then we'll add that to knob 2, the EQ high gain. Now what's dope about this is you only have to set this up once. Once you pull up the God particle or whatever plugin of your choosing, it will automatically remember the assignments, which is really dope. So now what I could do is play the beat and adjust the parameters of the God particle on the Motion 32. Now you can also do the same thing on the Motion 16 as well. Adjust the input gain. Turn up the limiter. So the next thing I want to do is add some more stuff to our beat here, utilizing Fender Studio Pro's new features. So what I want to do is grab something from Splice here. All right, I like this, but I only want the vocal. So what I can do here is drag and drop this in from Splice. And so now we have that Splice loop here. What I'm going to do is go ahead and right click. And then I want to get the stems from this. So I'm going to do separate stems with Moises. And you can do that by going to audio, scroll down to Moises, and then separate stems with Moises. So I'm going to go to separate stems, current selection. So it has the vocal and instrumental preset, basic bottle. I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so let's hit separate stems. So now it's just going to generate the vocal and the instrumental for us. Excellent. So now we have the original, the vocals, and then the other. So for this case, I just want the vocals. So I'll move that up, and then I'll go ahead and mute the other ones. And so the same thing here, we can add a delay to our vocal. So we'll go to add here. We'll go to effect. We'll go to analog delay here, hit load. Now we're in our analog delay, and we can make all of our tweaks right here on the Motion once again, which is nice. All right, now let's add some reverb using the new Studio Verb here. So we'll go to add, and then we'll come over here to Studio Verb, hit load. Okay, now you can see Studio Verb pops up in Fender Studio Pro here, and we can make our adjustments right here on the Motion, which is so dope. All right, now that we have our vibe, let's go ahead and do a rough arrangement of this. So what I'll do is grab all of these tracks here. Now I'll just duplicate them out. Let's duplicate this, let's say 4 times for this video here. And so I just do the process of elimination. Let's take out the vocals and the strings. We could do just the regular drums. And then maybe for the second half here, we can kind of add that vocal. So we'll bring that in. All right, so now that we have a rough arrangement and a rough mix, what I love to do is add performance effects to my beats. It really makes the beats come alive. It makes it feel like a song. So what we're gonna do is go to our master here, and we're gonna use a third-party plugin to get this done. So I'm gonna come over here to Fly Tape 2. All right, and this is from Air. And what I love about this is being able to assign these effects to the knobs here. We can add effects like stutter. All right, so if we hit this down arrow here, let's go to our settings to edit our mapping, and then we can click on Motion 32. You can see that the parameters have been set like we did earlier, where I've customized these. Now we can automate all of this. So we can turn on our automation controls here. All right, and then I'm going to set this to right. All right, and now we're ready to do a performance. Let's check it out. So I'm going to start by having the lo-fi trigger on. So we want this on first. There we go.
That's 100.
All right, and there is our beat featuring the motion controllers. I hope you guys got some value out of this video. If you did, give your brother a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on those bell notifications so you don't miss anything else, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace.